All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to be discussing the Secure Act 2.0. I know for many of you guys, this has been a hot topic as you get these emails about things that are coming down the line and certainly to prepare for as an employer. So I wanted to spend some time today. I brought in an expert here from Principal Financial Group, heads up in their government relations group. Lance is going to spend some time just going through an overview of Secure Act 2.0, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. Today, I want to make sure this is your guys' time. So if you guys do have questions at the end, feel free to throw it out there. Lance is an expert in the space, so certainly welcome him, and thanks for joining us today, Lance. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Carl. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lance Schoening, Director of Policy and Government Relations at Principal. If you're not already aware, Principal has a full-time team based in Washington, D.C., and our role there is to be up on the Hill as much as possible, talking to lawmakers about the benefits of specifically our retirement system here in the U.S. and watching out for any potential problematic issues that might come down the road, whether it be from a regulatory or legislative perspective. So Secure 2.0 has been a big part of my life the last several years, as was Secure 1.0. So a busy legislative kind of a session here over a number of years focused on retirement, which is relatively unprecedented, where we get two major retirement reform laws passed within a 3-year time span. So a lot to think about, a lot to absorb, and we've been working on that internally here as we work through the legislative text to understand what each provision means for our clients, how we can potentially support those. And then even further, where there is ambiguity in the statute that will require regulatory guidance. And there's a whole lot of that. So stay tuned and I'll talk about a few of those. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Great. So I've titled this A Little Something for Everything, and it's a little bit of a wordplay. There certainly, I think, is something for everyone, every plan sponsor to consider looking at as a potential addition to their plan. There are some new requirements that are going to impact you as well. But also from a legislative standpoint, the statute here is really a product of an 8-way negotiation. Okay, so the majority and minority staffers on the 4 relevant committees that are responsible for retirement law essentially negotiated this package. So as you can imagine, getting Democrats and Republicans from 4 different committees to agree on a set of enhancements to the retirement system was pretty challenging. And so what we're going to see in terms of the provisions here are really a reflection of what we can do in that type of environment. So there are huge arm swings here, changes in retirement policy from that perspective, but really there is, I think, a whole list of common sense improvements, enhancements to the system. There's also, I think, a reflection of some of the, let's say, consumer protection elements of the Democratic Party included here that were included in that negotiation process. So some things that we would not naturally support, but in the context of a very large package here with a lot of beneficial things, we certainly did support. So let me advance here. All right, so let's jump into some of the provisions. One of the big kind of focuses here is broadening plan sponsorship, specifically amongst small employers. So I won't spend a lot of time on here with this because this audience is made up of plan sponsors, but just know that from a startup tax credit perspective, there were some major enhancements made to that tax credit regime, really focused on employers that have 50 or fewer employees, giving them a better chance to maximize that $5,000 maximum tax credit each year for the first 3 years. That also applies to employers that join a MEP or PEP for the first time. So if you have a MEP or PEP and are accepting startup plans, you're going to have to support that automatic enrollment, automatic escalation element. But those new employers that join your plan can also take advantage of the full tax credit for the first 3 years. There's also a new tax credit element for those same startups that offer an employer contribution. So a little bit of additional incentive for those employers to offer an employer contribution. And then you'll see a theme throughout the provisions here about Roth, additional flexibility to offer an option for Roth treatment. Here, Simples and SEPs can be designated as Roth IRAs. All right, so let's talk about new capabilities. So as I mentioned, there are new options available for plan sponsors to consider offering. There is also some new requirements. So here we're talking about options. The first one here is a really innovative approach, I think, in terms of solving some of the challenges with the student loan debt burden that many employees younger employees are struggling with. And this would allow an employer to treat student loan debt repayments as if they're elected deferrals, really for the purpose of making matching contributions on behalf of those employees. So if you have employees who are really struggling with their student loan debt burden and they're not otherwise able to participate in the 401k plan, this could give you a way to help them start participating and saving for retirement through making a match on their behalf. For plans that might be a little bit concerned about testing consequences here, you can exclude that group from the ACP testing just to ensure that that doesn't become a problem. This provision is effective next year, and so we're looking at this. There is some guidance that's going to be required here, particularly the definition of a qualified student loan. So we're asking the IRS specifically to provide some guidance here as to whether a parent that has undertaken student loans for their child could actually qualify here. Also, co-signers to loans, would they qualify? So we need to have some of those questions answered to ensure that we're appropriately reflecting the spirit of the law. There's also an element here that allows the plan sponsor to rely on the employee to self-certify that they have a qualified loan. So in terms of how we intend to approach this support for this provision, I think a key part of that will be some type of election kind of process for the employee that we would provide to the employer as kind of a template that would run through those steps in terms of qualification, ensuring that the employee, has all the information available for them to indicate that it is a qualified loan. The other piece of key guidance we're waiting for here is the timing of that matching contribution. So actually in the statute, lawmakers directed the regulators to provide future guidance in terms of making these match contributions on a different frequency than the standard match program. So as you can imagine, if you have an employee that's been making student loan payments throughout the year, it might be more efficient and effective for that process to happen at the end of the year. And so that's where we're looking for guidance from the IRS or DOL that could allow a plan sponsor to do this at the end of the year, allow that employee to kind of tally up all of their student loan payments throughout the year and submit that, and then that matching contribution made at the end of the year or following the end of the year. So those are the types of things that we're looking for at this point from the regulators.
Lance, do you expect on that front, so you're expecting, let's just say, record keeper like Principal to have almost a new category for them to kind of track those loan payments? Or how are you guys, looking at kind of integrating that with the 401k?
Yes, so I do think that there will be some element of, I'm not sure if I would call it tracking, but maybe a recording of the information that's submitted so that, again, self-certification from the employee means that any type of audit challenge is going to be to the employee. It's not going to be to the plan, challenging the plan. So there's another kind of provision here related to hardships that have a similar employee self-certification. We don't want plan sponsors to kind of believe or feel like their employees are being kind of left out to their own devices. I don't think plan sponsors want that to happen. So there's going to be, I think, a regime here where we help to store those self-certification documentation so that if the employee does have a problem down the road, we can help them with that.
Perfect.
There's another kind of focus here in the legislation around accelerating savings for older workers and helping them retain those savings for a longer period of time. So required minimum distributions, which were the beginning age was increased under Secure 1.0, increased again with Secure 2.0 to age 73. And that is applicable for anyone who has turned or will turn age 72 in 2023. So as you work with your provider, what you want to do is ensure that that population of people who've turned 72 or will turn 72 this year are not receiving some directive that they must take a required minimum distribution. So we've already kind of ticked that off. We provided no communication to that group at the point where we learned of this. So there is no corrective communication that has to go out to this population. But they will then begin taking RMDs or be required to take RMDs next year. That beginning date is going to be increased even further to age 75 10 years from now. The other element here for older workers is an increase to the catch-up limit. So this is kind of one of those interesting provisions where we have what seems to be just pulled out of the air. Ages 60 to 63 will now have a higher catch-up limit, up to $10,000 a year. Why 60 to 63? Well, the lawmakers, when they look at retirement legislation, it's under kind of a requirement that any bill pays for itself internally. So you have elements that cost the government revenue, and then you have other elements that are going to raise revenue. And so to manage the cost here of higher catch-up limits, they restricted it to ages 60 to 63, okay? But just know that that group will have that ability to make the higher contribution if you choose to offer it to them. This is not a required element. If simple plans, that catch-up limit increases to $5,000 for that same age group. There's another kind of focus here on guaranteed income, and this follows what was done in the Secure 1.0 legislation, where under 1.0, they're really focused on barriers to offering guaranteed income that exist for plan fiduciaries. So they kind of made the process of the fiduciary duties much more, I think, reasonable. Okay, so here they're focusing on barriers that exist to certain product features that are very important to consumers when they purchase an annuity. And so these were kind of embedded in the required minimum distribution rules, which is kind of really an oddity. But just know that with this fix, it will allow in-plan annuities to include really important features like cost of living increases, which is extremely important in this environment, return of premium death benefits, as well as period certain guarantees. So again, all elements that are important, I think, for anybody that's considering giving a lump sum to an insurer for a promise of a future stream of guaranteed income. There are some other features here related to qualified longevity annuity contracts. These are really deeply deferred annuities that remove those barriers as well. So again, just a further kind of efforts to try to help encourage more Americans to consider guaranteed income for at least a portion of their retirement savings. All right, continuing on the capabilities discussion, really a series of helpful plan administration streamlining provisions. We'll start with the EPCRS, is the program where you can, when you have an inadvertent error, you can self-correct those errors without actually reporting to the IRS. This really has been expanded to cover virtually every type of inadvertent error. So really helpful, extremely helpful expansion of this. There are some elements that would still be required, but relatively limited in nature.
So would that be,
there's-
Lance, so under
Yep.
a scenario, maybe if, let's say an employer was late making a contribution for an employee, or there was a contribution change, would that fall under this expansion?
It would. I think the requirement here, the required element is that you must make that correction as soon as you learn of it. So what is not covered here is that if you become aware of an error and it's not corrected in a timely fashion, you're not able to take advantage of this program. Okay.
Thank you.
In addition to kind of, that I wanted to call out specifically that there is a new safe harbor for correcting auto enrollment and auto escalation mistakes in your payroll process. So there's a further kind of encouragement of auto enrollment, auto escalation under this legislation. And so the lawmakers wanted to ensure that specifically for smaller employers that might struggle with the payroll process, that they would, have the latitude to be able to make those errors or corrections on their own once they became aware of an inadvertent error in their payroll process. As I mentioned, hardship withdrawals, there's a new provision that would allow an employer to allow employees to self-certify that they have a deemed hardship withdrawal. So as with what we talked about for the student loan matching program, with employee self-certification, we're looking at kind of a process that we can put information in front of that employee that allows them to determine, okay, do I have a deemed hardship or not? And select that. And that information would be retained in the event that the employee has some future issue with the IRS. And then again, another very helpful provision where most ongoing notices would be eliminated for eligible participants or employees that are not participating in your retirement plan. So the only thing that would be required on an annual basis outside of that initial eligibility package would be an eligibility notice that they are eligible to participate. Outside of that, you could discontinue remaining notices. So as you can imagine, that's something that we're looking at right now in terms of how we can kind of identify that group and then strip out those ongoing notices. If you are a 403B plan sponsor, a number of improvements here. The hardship withdrawal rules for 403B plans have been aligned with that of 401k plans. So for the first time, both employer contributions and earnings would be available for hardship withdrawals for your employees. As well, 403B plans would be allowed to form and join MEPs and PEPs, multiple employer plans, pool employer plans. That was somewhat of an inadvertent error in Secure 1.0, where that was just left out of the process. So that has been corrected, and that new capability is available. I want to mention here that there was another provision that we were very much supporting, and that was the expansion of collective investment trusts to 403B plans. So this is something that 401k plans can have been able to benefit from, offering CITs, collective investment trusts, in addition to mutual funds, other types of products. And there was a provision here that would have expanded those types of products to 403B plans. Because of that complicated 8-way negotiation, we actually had one particular office, one staffer that objected due to some kind of obscure consumer protection concerns, and that was stripped out at the very end of the process. So we are in the kind of process of trying to get that added to future legislation so that 403B plans can also take advantage of collective investment trusts. I'll kind of end here with new capabilities with a new new options for emergency savings or under kind of the collective emergency savings manner. The first would be the ability for a plan sponsor to establish an after-tax sidecar emergency savings account. So this would sit alongside your defined contribution plan. It would allow employees to save up to $2,500 after tax, and they'd be able to withdraw from that account really at any point. You could limit withdrawals to once monthly, but no more frequently than that. Those individuals could use that for any purpose. There are some complications with this. This is an ERISA plan. It's not a bank account. So as you can imagine, there's fiduciary oversight with that. There's restrictions in terms of what types of investments, would be offered there. They must be, liquid, capital preservation type of investment options. There would be, again, that $2,500 account threshold limit. So once an employee hits that limit, they would not be able to contribute any more to that. And any of those contributions assigned to the emergency savings account would be redirected to the 401k account. So all of that would have to be mapped out in the administrative record keeping process to support this particular provision. In addition, if you have a matching program with your defined contribution plan, any contributions that the employee would make to the after-tax savings account would have to be matched at the same formula, but those matching contributions would go to the 401k or defined contribution plan. So as you can see, this is very complicated, it has strings attached to it. Just know that from principal's perspective, and I know other providers probably have similar types of things, we do have a banking solution. For us, it's in partnership with SoFi. That is not an ERISA plan, it's a banking account solution, and it avoids a lot of these challenges associated with an ERISA plan. We're hoping that Congress focuses in the future on a banking solution through Senate Banking Committee, something that could be offered that is less complicated than what you see here.
With the sidecar fund, does it have tax deferral as well? I guess it
no,
would.
it is
okay.
Just after tax. And I should have mentioned there is a capability here if a plan sponsor wanted to auto enroll employees up to 3% of pay into the after tax account. So again, but that would come with matching contributions. It could also, from a retirement perspective, looking at your retirement plan metrics could have kind of a draining effect in terms of your contribution experience on the 401k side. So just, those are types of considerations that you'll have to work through. The other emergency savings provision here is less about savings. It's more about a new withdrawal capability. And this would give, again, if the plan sponsor wanted to offer it, an annual capability for employees to pull out up to $1,000 from their defined contribution account, penalty-free for any purpose. But as with the savings account provision, there are other complications with this. The individual must either repay that distribution, let's say $1,000, into their 401k account, or recontribute just through their normal contributions up to the level of their prior distribution before they're eligible to take another distribution. And if neither of those two things happen, they can't take another $1,000 distribution for 3 years. So as you can see, there's a lot of tracking, again, associated with this that will have to be built out. And I think all of us will have to consider, is it worth it when you may also have a hardship withdrawal provision and a loan provision that goes along with that? So some key considerations there. All right, so as I mentioned, there are some new required elements in this new law. And the first one is, as I mentioned, the lawmakers need to pay for this package. This top one is the key revenue raiser for the package, and it requires that any catch-up contributions for individuals who earned $145,000 of wages in the prior year must be Roth in nature. So as you think about how to support this, this will be in the 2024 plan year. Will the $145,000 wage definition is actually FICA wages. So if you're not getting that from your payroll provider, that's going to be the kind of the first step. We'll need to capture those FICA wages for this particular identification process. And so again, anybody that is making this would be required to make Roth for those catch-up contributions, and that could apply both for kind of natural Roth contributions where you max out your tax deferral and then that swings over to Roth contributions or your contribution limit. But it could also apply to failed ADP testing. And as you think about that, ADP testing happens after the end of your plan and tax year. So we need guidance from the IRS as to how to handle those particular situations. We're also asking the IRS whether we can set up a negative election for this kind of group so that excess contributions kind of flow naturally as Roth contributions when we have this type of person with this contribution capable or limit, all right, or wage limit, sorry. So some things that we need to know, but I think this is one of the top items for the IRS to get to release guidance on. One last thing to mention here, if your plan has a catch-up contribution provision, you're going to have to support Roth contributions beginning in 2024. So there is a requirement with this provision that your plan must support Roth contributions for this population. So that is kind of the other element here that you want to look at in the short term to determine, you know, if I have catch-up contributions, if I don't sponsor or offer Roth today, I'm going to need to add that to my plan prior to 2024 to continue to support catch-up contributions. Going back to startup plans, this is an interesting new requirement. Any new startup plans after the effective date of Secure 2.0, which was December 29 of 2022, will be required to have an auto enrollment, auto escalation program at a minimum of 3% auto enroll, 1% auto increase, up to 10% of pay. That will be allowed to increase to 15% beginning in 2025. With this, while it's required now, there is a delayed implementation. So a plan sponsor that starts up a plan would not be required to actually implement this until 2025. Additionally, there is going to be a new requirement, it's out in the future a bit, that every plan must provide one paper benefit statement annually. This is one of those negotiation elements that is clearly, it was a requirement of the AARP. For whatever reason, they had hung their hat on this and said that in order to support this legislation, you must have this new provision where everybody gets one paper benefit statement. The only exceptions to this is that if you are relying on or can rely on the wired at work exception, which means you have employees that are sitting at a internet connected PC or terminal where they can get information as a regular part of their work day. You can rely on that for that population of your employees, or if you're getting affirmative consent. So if an employee opts out of paper, then you're okay. But everyone else is going to be required to be provided a paper statement once annually. The second, the last element here related to requirements is accelerated eligibility for a new class of eligible employees that was defined in Secure 1.0. This is the long-term part-time employee group. Under Secure 1.0, those people would have to be made eligible to participate once they work 500 or more hours each year for 3 consecutive years. At that point, as the plan sponsor, you would have to provide them with an eligibility notice, but that's all you have to do. You don't have to provide employer contributions, match or otherwise to this population. You don't need to auto-enroll this group, and you can carve them out of testing. So kind of a low lift, but an offer of eligibility for this group. If they want to participate, they can. Under Secure 2.0, this has now been accelerated to 2 consecutive years where that individual works 500 or more hours each year. This takes effect in the 2023 plan year. So those that work the 500 hours 2023, 2024 would be eligible to participate in 2025. For your groups that maybe work 500 or more hours in prior years, it's still the 3-year requirement. So a little bit complicated there, but just know that the 2 years starts this year for that first group that starts to work 500 or more hours in the year. So aside from required elements, I wanted to also focus on changes that are effective now. So we have the RMD changes that are effective now. We have a new option for employers to allow participants to treat employer contributions as Roth in nature. This has a really serious error associated with the statute. So we have essentially a need for the regulators to provide guidance on how to treat these Roth contributions if they're elected. Okay, you may be better if you're thinking about this type of optionality to offer a Roth in-plan conversion provision as an alternative. I think it would probably be a lower administrative lift, and you could offer it now versus waiting for the guidance that's going to be necessary. Other provisions effective now: the employee self-certification for hardship, limited ongoing notices for non-participants, and there's a requirement here for the automatic enrollment for startup plans that's that join a MEP or PEP for the first time. So top on our list of delivery options will be the employee self-certification for hardships, followed by limited ongoing notices for those non-participants. We're working on those and hope to have that capability in the near term. You know, there are a couple of areas here where there are IRA specific changes. Since we're short on time, I'm going to flip through these really quickly. There are some enhancements, key enhancements for qualified charitable distributions, new capabilities there. So if you're interested in those types of charitable contributions, look at that, pay some attention to that. There's no longer a 10% early withdrawal penalty if you have a excess contribution in your IRA. IRA catch-up limits will be increased for inflation. And a really interesting one, if you have unused 529 college savings funds that just were never used, if they've been there for 15 years or more, you are now able to, the beneficiary of that 529 is able to roll that over into a Roth IRA. So I think a really great new option there for those 529 plans. So I'll close out before we go to Q&A with a link here. This is our legislation page where you can go access this. Specifically, we have a provision summary document that goes through all of these provisions and more that I've covered and goes into specific detail. Plan designs that are impacted by each provision, the effective date of each one. So please go out and access that information. It's available to everyone and hopefully will be of use to you. So Carl, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Lance. Appreciate you taking some time to unpack some of this stuff. I know it could be quite complicated. So I want to just open it up to folks on the call. If you guys want to send in any questions to the chat or Q&A box, we can go ahead and give you guys that opportunity now. So feel free to send those in, and we'll go ahead and pass it over to Lance. So we'll give everyone a couple minutes now. So we decide to match based on student loan repayments. Will this require a plan restatement, do you expect?
Not a restatement. So there would be obviously a plan amendment. And so under the statute, you have, I believe, a couple of years to actually make those plan amendments. So for our process, probably very similar to other providers, we'll offer essentially a statement of intent for plan sponsors that will have the new capabilities where they can kind of select their plan provision with whatever optionality is included in each one as kind of a holding place until the plan amendment is formally done.
And then another question, I have 2 employees with catch-up contributions and earnings over 145,000. Do I need a Roth account now to my plan, or also will that require a plan restatement?
So this, let's go to the amendment first. So there would be a new a plan amendment required there, at least if you're adding Roth. There would not be a new plan amendment required just to comply with the $145,000 kind of force to Roth. So you don't have to have the Roth provision today. So this provision is effective in 2024. So the individual can still continue to make their catch-ups as tax deferred today. Beginning in 2024, those catch-ups are going to have to be Roth, and you will have to have that Roth provision in your plan. So that similar type of statement of intent to add a Roth provision would be something that you would use until such time as you do the formal plan amendment.
I guess along the same lines, are there going to be any requirements as far as employer contributions for plans to employees in the future?
No. So there are no required elements that you must make an employer contribution. In fact, there's a new type of 401k plan, 403b plan that was established under Secure 2.0 that would essentially follow closely or near to the IRA contribution limits. It's intended to be a low lift kind of retirement option where you don't have testing. It's only employee contributions. So there wasn't really a movement towards mandatory employer contributions or really mandatory anything for the most part for plan sponsors.
And the question on the auto enrollment, yeah, I mean, employees have the ability to opt out. That's fundamentally their option, right? I mean, the biggest thing the government's really trying to do is encourage savings, and that's the big push towards auto enrollment, because we know statistically most folks do nothing. So if you auto enroll, and that's why I also would recommend on this call is really I think all plans should offer auto enrollment. But really, I think the biggest challenge is a lot of groups are focusing at 3% and 5% levels. I think the big goal is to really try to increase that into the future. I mean, the government's telling you they want you to have a minimum of 10% contribution just because they have that auto escalation feature. So if you're a little bit worried about using such an auto enrollment of 10%, the auto escalation option is certainly a good way to start, because you could start at 3 or 5% and then use that to work with employees to auto escalate over time. And we all know a contribution change of 1% doesn't affect their actual payroll that much in the end.
Yeah, great comments. The data is very clear. There's really no disagreement, and we have it in our own data. You can see it in industry data. Individuals don't tend to opt out of auto enrollment, auto escalate, and they don't tend to opt out at a different kind of percentage when you auto enroll at 3% versus auto enrolling at 5%. So it definitely shows that there's an ability to help nudge people into a higher contribution savings rate.
Yeah, I mean, and two, from a savings perspective, I mean, if you're starting in your mid-20s, I mean, for just overall savings, you should be saving a minimum of 10 to 12%. So, the 3 to 5% is certainly a starting point. But I mean, if you're just starting saving for the first time in your 30s, I mean, you need to be saving north of 15% just to kind of catch up. So, I mean, that's one of the fundamental issues that we recommend to employers to focus on, trying to push employees forward from a contribution standpoint, because it ultimately helps your organization as well. The more folks that are saving and positioned better for retirement, the less likely they are to jump to another company just to get a few extra bucks. Any other questions before we close out today? Feel free to give everyone one or two more minutes here to send it in, and then we're going to go ahead and close out the call. So for you guys in the call, we're going to head, we did tape the call as well. So we will put this together for you guys on the join, so you guys can have access to it. Should you want to watch in the future, have additional questions, feel free to lean on me if you guys would like to go over any of the topics. Lance is certainly him and Principal are certainly a resource for you guys to tap into as well. So I'm glad to pass along any future questions. We do realize it's pretty tough stuff to unpack. So, certainly lean on the experts. With that, I appreciate everyone joining today. Thanks again, Lance, for giving us your time and your expertise. For the rest of you guys, look forward to speaking with you, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Yeah, take care.